In order to imitate the sprawling nymphs from the Libellulidae dragonfly clan, successful patterns must be buoyant so the fly skips and bumps just above the weed tops. The spun and clipped deer hair body of the Gomphus not only provides the necessary buoyancy, but also mimics the scruffy look of the natural nymphs. In addition to deer hair, here are the other materials you will need to tie your own Gomphus. Let's tie the Gomphus, Pacific Northwest and particularly British Columbia favorite. It's a dragonfly nymph imitation of the smaller sprawler nymphs from the Libellulidae family. So into the jaws of the vise, I've got a number 8 Daiichi 1710. Probably tie 8s most often. You can tie these in a number 10. That's about as big as you want to get is a number 10. These aren't a big nymph, but they're squat and spider-like. So I'm going to attach some tying thread, and for the tying thread we're going to start about a quarter of the way back or a third of the way back from the hook eye, just to keep our proportions in order. That's where the head's going to start. And this is GSP. We're going to be doing spinning deer hair. So GSP is very strong thread. This is 100 in olive, and we're just going to get that base coat of thread down. And now we're just going to put the primary ingredient of this fly and spin it onto the hook, and that's deer hair. So I'm just taking a chunk of deer hair about the diameter of a pencil, and I'm going to take and use my thumb and forefinger. You could use a small comb as well. Is just take out that loose under fur and short fibers out. That'll help the hair spin. And since we're not stacking this, we don't need the tips or anything like that. So I'm just going to pre-trim a little bit by trimming the deer hair, the tips of the deer hair off. Right, so I've got a little half-inch or so length chunk, and I'm going to go around once, twice, and see as I pull down that starts to flare. At this point I'm just going to allow it to start to rotate, and then I'm just going to let it spin, and I'm going to continue wrapping. Not tucked around and caught the hook point a bit, that's no big deal, it's the first stack near the bend. And with this GSP, I could actually, if I let go, I'd be pulling the vise off the table. And we just keep that in place, and we'll push that back a little bit, and then sort of zigzag our thread forward a couple of wraps. We're way out in front of it, and we're going to take a second pencil-sized clump, trim it from the hide. Once again, remove those short fur, under fur and short fibers. Those will inhibit spinning if they're not removed. Trim the tips off, so I've got a manageable chunk. Place it on top, place the thread wraps right in the middle of the stack. Once, twice, pull, see it starts to flare. At that point I let go and let the thread rotate it around. And if some deer hair gets trapped, and then what we're going to do is once it stops spinning, you spin and keep winding the thread until that deer hair doesn't spin anymore. And then you could take the hollowed out of a Bic pen, or you can buy these, this is a brassy hair packer, and we're just going to take this, it's got a little notch cut into it that slides onto the shank like a big oversized pair of tweezers, and we're just going to hold support the rear of the fly and just push and pack those stacks together. The more packed, the denser the body, the better it's going to float. And this fly has buoyant properties from it because the natural nymphs are not like their larger darner cousins in that although both families can shoot water out of their rectal chamber, the gills are located at the tip of the abdomen. These guys tend to crawl a lot and not more sedentary in nature. So you need a fly with some buoyancy, and so you can move it at a slow, more pedestrian pace than some of the more aggressive retrieves for the darners. So again, 2 wraps around, get that to spin and rotate, continue winding that tying thread. That deer hair is spun, it's not going anywhere. Track our hair packer down. Support the back of the fly simply so you don't want to push everything off the bend, right? And give that a good push. and then a couple of wraps out in front. And it's always, rather than trying to pack your deer hair, your next stack right against the previous stack, if you get that tying thread out in front a little bit and tie it in there and pack it back, it just makes it a lot easier. You're not trying to make your first wrap your best or your most accurate wrap. So we're going to continue this sort of stacking and preparing and trimming and spinning process until we have a dense spun deer hair body underway. All that's left to do will be give it a final haircut. Again, we keep winding that thread until it doesn't spin anymore. Dig out our hair packer and push. And we want to come up, I got probably get a couple more stacks in here. Again, trim, pencil size clump, remove our short fibers and underfur. And if you get a deer that's been harvested early in the fall season, its underfur won't be as dense. It'll be better spinning hair. You want hair that's kind of soft and spongy to feel. That spins really nice. Sometimes dyed hairs, the dyeing process can take a lot of the moisture and the sponginess out of it and make it difficult to spin. So that's probably pretty good, because we still got to factor in the head and legs we've got to put in. So there we go. We've spun and clipped up the body, and now what's left to do is give this fly a haircut. You got to keep the overall body shape of the sprawler nymphs in mind. So they're kind of flat top and bottom and rounded along the sides, kind of more, like I say, squat and spider-like is the general description. You can whip finish and remove the thread and trim the fly in hand. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to do my level best to trim this fly on camera, more beneficial. So I'm actually just going to roll the fly upside down, and I'm going to come in with a sharp pair of scissors. And when you trim in deer hair, short, controlled, or non-aggressive trims to start with, because once you trim it off, obviously you can't glue it back on again. So I want to trim this as flush as I can. Some tires actually use a razor blade as well, works well. But for these little flies, you know, we're not doing big bass bug hair cutting here, so we're just going to trim that nice and flush along the bottom. That's simply going to allow us to keep our hook gape open so we can hook fish on this fly. And then we're going to roll it back around, and I like to come up and trim it flush, pretty well flush on top. And again, this is, you know, not a fly it's you have to spend a lot of time on this. These flies are the natural nymphs are have lots of little hairs all over their body that they use to trap sediment on, because they're ambush feeders. They like to bury themselves in the weeds and along the bottom debris and lay in wait for their prey to come by. They're larger, more aggressive, what we call darner cousins from the Ishidae family. They're more aggressive hunters. They hunt more like a cat. So again, we've got that trimmed. Give that a little, blow that out of there. We're just doing some rough trims now. Now, to do the sides of the fly, a curved pair of scissors comes in really handy, but you can do it with straight pair as well. And again, we just want to come in and keep that over the general shape of the Gomphus, I mean the Sympetrum nymphs. Actually, Gomphus are a river-dwelling species for the most part, so they're probably a bit of a misnomer in the fly's name, but fish aren't entomologists, so they don't really care. So I'm just sitting here, and deer hair can take all day, so I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes and keeping it just little trims. Sometimes it's a good idea just to ruffle the fly a little bit, if that's the right term to use, and it frees up some hairs that maybe been trapped in the spinning process. And when you're rotating around, you want to make sure you don't get the thread all worked through the. Try to remember the direction you rolled the vise in, and just do the opposite when you come back. I think for demonstration purposes and probably for practical purposes, we're done here. You don't want to over trim. One of the things too as well should be in mind is just at the front of the fly, I like to, notice I'm holding the thread out of the way, it's just on a bit of an angle here. We're simply clearing a path for the legs to come through. And the beauty of this Kevlar thread is it's very hard to trim something accidentally, because the thread is frankly hard to cut with scissors, so that's another benefit to using it besides its strength. Anyway, there we go, sort of the finished body, if you will. Alright, now we're going to tie in the legs, and for the legs you could use regular pheasant tail. I like to use softer materials, and this is lesser used hen pheasant center tail, and it's got some nice modeling to it, and a little more subtle in nature. So I'm going to take off about 6 to 8 fibers off and tie in 2 clumps along each side of the body. So from the hen pheasant, I've trimmed off 6 to 8, maybe even 10 fibers, because sometimes we're going to spin another head of deer hair in front here, and there can be some mortality in the legs. So I'm just going to take and lay up one side. You can see the tips of the hen pheasant fibers roughly reach the tip of the body, and then we're just going to along the side, along the far side, just going to lay those in place along the far side, a couple of wraps, and secure them back. So I actually tied forward of their final resting place and use the thread pressure to form them back. Okay, and then we'll take that thread forward again, and we'll do a second clump of the hen pheasant fibers. And again, you can use other materials as well. Mallard, guinea, regular ringneck pheasant works just fine as well. It's, again, a lot of times it's just personal preference. And again, we're going to hold that up on the other side and try to get them the same length. If anything, it's better to tie them in longer and pull them to length. But after a while, you can get sort of the hang of it all, and then secure those back. If I've done this right, when I roll this out, I should have a set of legs down each side like that. And what we could do as well is take our thumbnails, and if you just rake them on the inside, you'll put a bit of a curve in them. But you want them to stand out a bit, so when you're stripping them or moving them through the water, they're going to stand out and then spring back when you retrieve the fly. And generally it's a slow, steady hand twist or a strip pause, depending on the activity level of the fish and what they want. So if those legs standing out like this are going to sweep back and swim forward, and it gives the appearance the nymph, your fly, is actually walking. And then we're just going to come in and trim away the excess. Alright, and now the front of the fly, the head of the fly, is the same as the body, spun and clipped deer hair. So probably 1, maybe 2 clumps. To prepare the deer hair again, you're going to grip it by the tips, use a small comb or your thumb and forefinger, remove the short fibers and the under fur that inhibit the spinning process, and then trim the tips away. And I've got this, you notice how the thread is about halfway between the rear of the front of the body and the eye of the hook, and we're going to go around once, twice, pull, allow that to spin. Probably going to flare because I got a fair bit of thread down there. It'll stop it from spinning, and push it back. Again, you can use your thumb and forefinger, body of a pen, or if you do a lot of stacking, you might want to invest in a packer of some sort. These brassy ones I've been using for years seem to work good. Whatever you like. And we probably get one more stack of deer hair in. Again, the more compact and compressed and tightly packed the body is, the more buoyant it's going to be, and the better it's going to skip and walk above the weed tops and bottom debris that these nymphs love to inhabit. And your fly will stay out of trouble, be snag free. So we got 2 stacks in there. Find that hook eye, give it a push, and then now we're just going to come up with our whip finisher. Whip finish the fly, and the tying process is done. So what we may want to do, because we've got a lot of fur in there, is coat that Kevlar with a little bit of super glue. And I'm going to stroke everything back out of the way to expose the hook eye. Again, just as best you can, stop from trapping any fibers. And then whip finish. Get that one wrap around. Keep your thread out of trouble. Disengage, and then with Kevlar, you just kind of saw the blades against it. It's not a cut like with traditional thread. And now all it remains is to give the final haircut to this fly. So very similar. We're going to come in, and if we do it break the fly into quarters, so we're going to trim flush on the bottom. And again, because of the legs, we want to make short little accurate cuts, and again flush along the bottom to aid the hooking process, and then come in on the top, flush on the top. Where you're going to get into a little bit of trouble or potential risk, of course, is when we come in down the side. So again, these curved scissors, and the head is kind of triangular in nature. So what I like to do is I'm just going to force these, squish the hair flat, that'll make it stand out, and I'm going to come in and just a little bit to round the front of the head here, and then I'm going to hold the legs on the far side, and we're going to try and come in and trim. Sometimes the best way is to come in with what I've done, if you see on these legs, I take the scissor blades and I actually lay them on top of the legs, and in theory, if I cut from the side like this, because I'm using the scissor blades to suppress and hold the legs down, I shouldn't have any unfortunate accidents. If you happen to trim a few legs off, it's not the end of the world. And even if you trim all of the legs off, you could just reattach the thread behind the head and attach them at that point too. So we're just going to trim these through. Again, laying the scissor blades, isolating, having a look. There we go, there's the legs. Put the scissor blades on top, and I'm just using the tip so I can clearly see what's in the jaws of the scissors before I squeeze them tight to cut with my thumb and forefinger. I'm just manicuring for effect now. Little controlled cuts. Every once in a while there's a little fiber. And again, just get in the habit of pulling those legs in. And as we did on the body, you can spend hours trimming deer hair heads. But there you go, you kind of get the overall gist. If anything, I'd like a little bit more separation between the head and the body, but I don't think the trout really care. They just see this, it's got the approximate shape, coloration. Natural deer hair is a great color for these nymphs as well. I tied them, sometimes you see over over Cara, where it's clearer lakes or a little brighter green coloration in your vegetation. Always a good indication of what color you should be tying your flies in is the vegetation. That's what they've got to hide in, both predator and prey, so they're going to match that. So olive is another good coloration. You can even blend colors of deer hair, much like dubbing. If you look at my book, Fly Patterns for Still Waters, there's a pattern there called Dunk's Carry. And Duncan Laird, who created the fly, blended deer hair, lots of different colors together in a container, just like dubbing. But there you go, the Gomphus. For more information on fly fishing, and stillwater fly fishing in particular, please visit my website at flycraftangling.com. Here you will find fishing tips, fly patterns, articles, information regarding my seminars and schools, along with links to my blog and mine and Brian Chan's online stillwater fly fishing store. You can also visit our store directly at stillwaterflyfishingstore.com. While you're visiting my site, please join my mailing list to receive my educational newsletters. You can also follow me through my social media channels. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and give this video a like. Please take the time to watch my other videos as well. Thanks for watching.